Hello, my name is Sydney and today is Thursday, March 28th. Yeah, and I was doing a little bit of note-taking today. I have my notebook, my Stormcloud notebook. I'm sort of on at a pivot point between Pitchfork and Stormcloud, where like I want to work on Pitchfork, but it's just like it's so complicated. I feel like I know what the issues are. I just have to kind of let them work in the back of my mind. And so I switched to Stormcloud, and I was just kind of thinking of like revising a little bit of the beginning, because I can never seem to get this first chapter right. You know, and it's like, it's not just because it's the first chapter and you know all the pressures that entails. It's also like, it's just like what's happening in the scene is not quite doing what I want it to do, and it's not coming across the way I want it to come across. I can't quite figure out a way to do it in a way that, you know, is interesting to somebody other than me. And I'm gonna fix the camera angle here. I feel like I'm a bit low or something. I can't seem to get the first chapter right in a way that it's interesting to somebody other than me, in a way that it introduces the right questions, like it asks the right questions. I'm still crooked, oh my god. In a way that it forms the right questions in the reader's mind and then answers the right questions, and you know, all that stuff that the beginning is supposed to do. In addition to the beginning, I'm looking also at a couple of kind of like my character's goal. Like she's, you know, she has the goal, right? She's trying to accomplish this one thing, and I'm sort of slightly tweaking that, so she's trying to accomplish this slightly other thing, and not in a way that's gonna like totally drastically revamp the story, but it is gonna change some of the plot points and like how she finds out information and all that stuff, which is totally doable. Like, it's not intimidating to me or anything. I'm actually looking forward to it, and I think I'm gonna try to do that for NaNoWriMo. I'm hoping by the end of April I can get through this draft of Stormcloud. Going back to how I'm having my main character have a slightly different goal. So your main character, I think, goes into the story, right, with a question. They have some sort of question in mind or some goals they want to accomplish. So my main character Race, like I'll link my other video down below where I explain what Stormcloud is about, but my main character Race, like she wants to know basically how is she possible, like how is she a Seriad of two regions. And so that's her initial question from the very beginning, like that she wants to answer. And so I wrote that down in my notebook, in my handy dandy notebook, and I wrote it as initial question: how is she possible as a Seriad of two regions? And then I put some like sub points under there where I explain, okay, here are Race's circumstances in the very beginning of the story. Here are some things that sort of relate to the question that I have just asked. Things that basically giving a bit of background to this question and why it's her question. And so that's the initial question that sort of propels the first third, not the first third, part one of the story, because part one is from the beginning up into my new character entering this new world. That's when the whole story sort of pivots. You know, it's like, if you want an example of what I mean, it's like Harry Potter. The story starts and he's, you know, living under the stairs at the Dursleys or whatever. Is that their name? Anyway, and then the story sort of pivots facing a new world, you know, when Hagrid tells him he's a wizard and he, you know, eventually ends up going to Hogwarts. Like, that's sort of what I mean here. Like, my main character has just been told she's a wizard and now she's going to Hogwarts. It's not quite what happened in my story, folks, but just as an example. And so that's my first question. So once she gets to Hogwarts, her initial question can either completely change, you know, in light of maybe some new information that's come across, or it can expand. So in my case, Race still has the same question, but it's expanded upon based on new information that she's received from her adoptive mother and from entering this new world. And so that second question, that expansion of the first question, is what propels the bulk of the story all the way to the climax. But then once she gets to the climax, again, she can either have the same question that's expanded upon or have a completely different question. And so once the climax will come around, she'll sort of have a different question, but still relates to the first question. And so that third question, that final question, is what goes from the climax to the end of the story, and that's part 3. Hopefully that all just made sense. Now, this is not something that I found online or anything. I was just sort of playing around. I was actually going to list like all the questions of the story and whatnot, and then like I kind of just by accident discovered that no, not all the questions. These 3 main questions, these are the 3 main questions that my character deals with personally. Like, to her, like, other characters have their own goals, but this is what my main character's goals are, and those are the questions that guide her actions throughout the plot. So I think this is some sort of breakthrough method for me, because it helps me to seriously understand what I'm doing with the story and like how to plot the story. Like the story of course already has a plot from this being like draft 7.5. Some of that's going to change a little bit in light of this new revelation of these 3 questions. I really feel like this is like super groundbreaking for me because I feel like I now have a direction to move in terms of like a revision and like actually understanding how to re-see this story in a way that makes it, or rather in a way that helps me make it better. So there's that. So these 3 questions is one thing that I've kind of figured out today in terms of moving forward with revising this story. The second thing that I figured out was themes. Now, I also will link down a video below. Was that a sentence? I will also link down below a video in which I talked about discovering my book's theme by accident. I can't remember if in that video I talked about Stormcloud or Pitchfork, but it was obviously definitely one of the two. But in that video I talked about like how I discovered the theme of my book by accident as a person who was never really looking to do that. Like I've never really been a person who's into themes, but like ever since I discovered my book's theme by accident, I have been really interested in like the themes of my own stories and like capturing, like once you figure out this theme, then when you go back to do a revision, you can now, I guess, you can tweak the story so that this theme fits in a lot better. And so I figured out a theme for Pitchfork, and it's about the theme of, I don't even know if I want to say what it is. Maybe I've told you enough already. I feel like Pitchfork is the kind of story that you don't want to know too much, if anything, going in. And so what I've said online and what I've said in my channel is like, honestly, even that would be too much for me as personally. Like if I were reading that book, that's more than I want to know. But going into it. But yeah, but anyway, I figured out this theme for Pitchfork that I think would be really, really interesting to see played out. And so I don't know if it's like the central theme or if it's like a sort of side theme. And if that's the case, I have to figure out what the central theme is. But I think that makes it really easy to figure out, okay, the main plot thread, Amber's main plot thread throughout Pitchfork, whatever it is, it needs to pertain to the central theme. Not at every step of the way, but I think that doing so, trying to anchor the plot to this theme will make it really kind of straightforward for me in terms of figuring out what plot events need to be there and what plot events can probably go, which is exactly what I need at this stage with this story, because like I love this story to death. I really do. And it's exactly the kind of book I would want to read, which is exactly the kind of book you should write as a writer. But it's just so hard to write, you know. I'm not giving up on it. I'm not putting it aside. I am going full steam ahead with this story. It's just a matter of like figuring it out, you know. Like I owe this story that much. So the theme will help me sort of anchor the plot and figure out how to move forward with that. I did try to do the question method, the 3 question method. I tried to do that with Pitchfork, and I had the first question. I struggled to figure out when the second question would be asked. Like I struggled to figure out where exactly in that story Amber enters this new world. That story sort of starts in medias res, whatever that, I forget the phrase, but basically it means that the story starts in the middle of the action. So in that case, that is how the story starts, and so it's hard for me to figure out when exactly is the new world that she's entering coming into play. Even once I figured out where it might be asked, it was difficult to figure out what the question was, because the question that I initially came up with, which was like the natural question that would be asked at that particular point, is not the main thing that drives her throughout the story. Like, yeah, it's a question that she wants to know, but it's sort of a side question to the main question that's propelling her actions. I started to think, okay, either the question needs to change or the plot needs to change, because between the two of them, they're not quite matching up. And so that tells me that, yeah, that's the question that Amber asked at that point, but maybe that's not the right question that she should be asking, or the plot needs to change in some way. So just to recap, I'm putting that story on the back burner temporarily while I work on Stormcloud, because I really do feel like some of the best ideas or the best answers that I come up with are a result of me not focusing on it. You know, it's like why you always have those eureka moments when you're like driving or you're in the shower. It's because you're not thinking about the problem, or at least not consciously. Anyway, that's where I am with Stormcloud and with Pitchfork. Good luck to all of you folks who are doing Camp NaNoWriMo. Oh, can I just say that, you know, if you have participated in NaNoWriMo before, you might recognize the name Tim Kim, and he's like either the program coordinator or I don't know, but he's some sort of head honcho at NaNoWriMo, and he is in my Camp NaNoWriMo cabin. Like, it's actually him. I was like, what the heck? Is this the same Tim Kim? And it is. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little bit of a chat, this discussion. It was kind of my way to say out loud the things that I was thinking in my head. Give this video a like, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time. Toodaloo!